Now, so the pattern of the conversation today is some provocation, followed by a conversation where we'll go into breakout rooms, which will there will be some people from Belfast City Council and others who will help get the conversation started in those breakout rooms, and then another set of provocations, and then another conversation, and there will be opportunity to feedback at the end of each of the conversations, and we'd like to be hearing from you. But the purpose of all of this is for us to get into conversation around the topics and ideas behind Playful City. So we're going to move into one shortly. But before that, we're going to have Stella Duffy, who's an award-winning writer, theatre maker, producer, who is also the co-founder and co-director of Fun Palaces. Stella, we're delighted that you could join us. And really interesting to hear what you have to say on this topic.
Brilliant. I shall just share my screen. So that's shared. I can see 5 of you. Can a bunch of you? Yeah, good. Okay. I had to stand up for this bit, just because it feels weird to sit down. So I'm going to do this in a whole 10 minutes, I promise. So Fun Palaces was co-founded in 2013 by me and my co-director, Sarah Jane Rawlings. Kevin was talking about his background. My background is I'm a theatre maker and a writer, but I'm also the youngest of 7 kids from a council estate in southeast London. And when I was 5 years old, we moved to my dad's native New Zealand. And I grew up in a small rural timber town. My experience is of being working class in both very urban and very half mill based, but very rural areas. And I know that they have similarities and differences, but what I do know is that the arts wasn't coming to us. And being the youngest of 7, my siblings are bright, smart, brilliant people who just didn't get the chances I did, because they had to leave school at 15 and 16 and didn't get the privilege of education in the same way that I did. And my dad was one of those classic old school aspirational working class men. And I do not mean the aspirational that means it's about money. Some of you will have come from the same background. It's the aspirational about having choices. And my experience of Arts Connection is Arts Connection gives us more choices, but only when we include people as creators in the arts, not just as consumers. So that's what Fun Palaces is about. We're a campaign that believes in the genius in everyone. And that's a phrase from Joan Littlewood, who was a theatre director in the 1960s. And she worked with Cedric Price, the architect, and they came up with this idea in the 1960s, and it was never built. So there was the idea of one building to house them all the arts, all the sciences, all the tech, all the sport. People would come along, it would be free, it would be local, and they would feel at home in it because it was their local space. And of course that didn't happen then, but it still hasn't happened for my money yet. Our theatres, our art galleries, our museums, even some of our art centres are still places that not everyone feels at home in. And so we came up with this idea to see if we could reinvent the idea for the 21st century using the spaces we already have that are far too underused as it is. Since 2014, we have an annual weekend of action every October. There have been 1,758 Fun Palaces and with over 500,000 participants. But the people that really matter are the local makers, because we don't run the Fun Palaces, the 4 of us in South London who work 2 days a week, or our 7 ambassadors around the UK. The local people run the Fun Palaces by and for themselves because they know about their community better than anyone else. For Fun Palaces, every place matters and every person matters. And our mission is to support anybody, whatever their experience, to lead locally. And I say whatever their experience, and I mean we back that up with things like a template risk assessment form in our resources pack on our website. We also believe that culture needs to be determined by that community. And that means hyperlocal. So, and I understand, speaking to people in Northern Ireland, that this has come up for you so much. And I also understand that my use of the word culture to incorporate arts is often differently heard in Northern Ireland. And very happy to talk about this more. But when I say culture in Fun Palace's terms, I'm talking about the things we do to connect rather than our sectarian cultures. This is our film from last year.
Fun palaces are made by local people sharing skills with their neighbours, creating tiny revolutions of connection. Since 2014, there have been 1,758 community fun palaces, with over 500,000 people taking part. We asked the makers what fun palaces mean to them and why they join in year after year.
We had a fun palace last year, and just about every day since, we've had a fun palace here. Thank you so much for kickstarting all of our community involvement. It's where the whole community can come together, maybe adult, children, family, on your own, and come together and you do something maybe creative that you've not done before, and it's time to have a cup of tea and chat.
So lots of different people come together, lots of organisations, but we all kind of feel like we're one unit, and it's a really positive and relaxed space.
The Fun Palace changes year on year because new people ask to be part of it, and we want as many people as possible to be part of it that way. And every year, I would say, perhaps has something to say about who we are as a city.
Over 4 years that we've been doing it, we've seen that solidify that connection, confidence grow within all of us as Fun Palace makers.
It just ignites passions in people that they can then follow up, either as a study or as an interest.
There is something about the connections that Fun Palace brings together, and the barriers it breaks down, actually. It just feels like something that should be happening everywhere.
I think you get to know more people. It's positive. It's a positive vibe in the community. That's why I think it's quite nice.
Yeah. I've just enjoyed meeting the people and showing them what I can do and stuff. And, I think I've enjoyed it.
Jess and I both, over 4 years ago, took our own children to fun palaces, and then we got together and said, wouldn't it be great if we could have a fun palace in Sturchley? And we haven't looked back since.
It's really sort of embedded me further in my local community and made me reach out to lots of different people that I wouldn't have otherwise spoken to, so it's really wonderful.
The most valuable part is teaching my kids how to volunteer, how to give free time to the community.
Yeah, it's been beautiful, doing play, placards, getting people to colleagues to play, and just about sharing what they love and what they want to change about the world.
In one part of the town here, we have some of the largest social disadvantage in the country. And in the other half, we've got some of the richest people in the country. We've brought them all together.
It's a very good opportunity to communicate with people and to introduce them to our culture, to Syrian culture. I know I learned a lot about the culture as well.
People are looking forward for the next year, every time we do it.
I'm really proud of
I love seeing that when people start chatting to each other and then they might say, do you ever go to such? No, well, I'll come to you next time. That is what it's all about, community working.
It's just so worthwhile. You're part of something bigger than yourself.
Make a Fun Palace in 2020 on the 3rd and 4th of October. Find out more at funpalaces.co.uk.
So I think the main thing to say out of that film is that we are not artist-led, we're community-led. And so somebody leading a Fun Palace in their community might well be an artist, but we would encourage them not to bring their artwork for free, but to bring something else they're passionate about. So when we say about skills sharing, we're not saying come along and give what you should be being paid for free. We're saying, is there something you would like to share? And that's because we've discovered that when you say to people, sit down and have a cup of tea, that's a really hard ask of people who don't know each other necessarily very well in their community. But if you say, is there something you are passionate about? Is there something you care about? Whether or not you're an expert, and we welcome experts and people who've done, 3 lessons on how to play a guitar. We welcome people to share what they care about. We found that over the years, a large majority of them happen in libraries because they are the physical places that people feel safe in. But that said, we've also had Fun Palaces in a tourist information centre, a field, a pub, a canal towpath, and my favourite from last year, a battleground. That was in Culloden in Scotland. The key is local people sharing skills with their neighbours. We've discovered that maker teams have about 12 people. We encourage a community to co-create together. We get one person to sign up as a lead maker. They'll bring in other people they know. What we're getting is accidental intergenerationality. We're not forcing it to happen, it's happening anyway. People bring in local political issues regardless, and we're really fine with that. We believe that handing over to community is a political stance anyway. It's a small p political, but it really matters, and particularly with what's been going on this year, where we've seen the mutual aid groups, the local support groups. I think we believe, and we've seen with the people who've signed up this year, that what's going to happen next year is that there's going to be, those groups are going to want to keep doing stuff, and they're already working together. So things like this are great ways for them to keep going. Crafting shows up a lot, but so does sports, so do other people's languages, and so does health and well-being. And we're beginning to see that a lot, and we expect that's going to show up a lot more this year. Teams of makers, different people getting in touch. And I think, again, out of 2020, one of the really important things is that people say that running a Fun Palace contributed positively to their well-being, feeling happier and less lonely. And bearing in mind that this is being organised by Belfast City Council, you need to know that 81% of Fun Palaces last year needed no extra money to do so. People were giving the thing they care about, rather than saying, I can only do this if I get this funding to do that. When we ask people to share what they care about, they connect in a really different way. We support them with a whole bunch of other stuff, posters and comms and one-to-one and workshops and dozens of individual phone calls, and our ambassadors. Siobhan is here, she's our ambassador in Northern Ireland, and I'll get her to wave when I've done this. I've got 1 minute left. This is what we did in response to lockdown. We created Tiny Revolutions. All the stuff's on our website. This is what we're doing this year. Tiny Fun Palaces. We've got 171 Fun Palaces signed up already, which is amazing. Let me show you. Oh, these are the ones that you've got. Oh no, I just made that go away. I didn't mean to. Here, so these are the Fun Palaces across the UK. We are international. We got our first one in Phnom Penh signed up this morning. These are your Northern Irish ones at the moment. And if I just escape here, I can show you who the ones are. I could actually show you the Belfast one. Don't say that, go away. There, and this is our website. And here you go. Oh, look, new ones. Heidi's Crazy Fun Palace. There you go. I don't know who Heidi is. Maybe you do. Panda World scooters and colourful fun. People are making tiny Fun Palaces that may just be with their immediate neighbours, with half a dozen friends. There's one in Orkney that I'm in love with a bit. It's just somebody sharing in her garden what she does herself and cares about. I'd also like to say really clearly, it's not about kids and it's not about family fun, okay? Just to be very clear, we're not family friendly. I know that that's a shocking thing to say, but the reason I'm saying it is we are not saying that fun only belongs to children. The reason I'm saying it is that we've got this elderly, aging population that really need including as well. And the minute you call something family friendly, those people think it's not for them. And so do the teenagers. So we don't use that term. Of course we are family friendly, but we don't use that term because we want it to be for all ages and led by all ages. I'll shut up now. Sorry, that was a minute too long.
Well, congratulations. That was a fantastic romp through fun palaces. That was brilliant. I loved culture, the things we do to connect. That's quite interesting. So now we're going to go, my colleague Andrea is going to put us into breakout rooms, so you will see something pop up in a little moment. And the question that can be helpful here is, what do you think is the role of play in our neighbourhoods and communities? Hopefully that's clear. You'll have about 20-25 minutes to chat together in smaller groups. And so when you see the breakout room thing, just fire away and we'll see you in a little while. Well, that was fun.
That was playful.
Indeed. So listen, we're going to have a few minutes of feedback now. I think we're about 5 breakout groups. So maybe someone would volunteer to start, say which group they were in.
I would
Carrie
like to
from
start
group
while
4.
my children are quiet. I'll take that opportunity.
Oh, lovely.
Group 4, I think. So we, hang on just 2 wee seconds up. We started off chatting about the importance of space and not particularly formal spaces for play, but just free open spaces that are there for the community, whatever. Well, we started off talking about children and the importance of car-free, safe spaces to allow children to be do unstructured play, to sort of allow their imagination to run wild. And then we opened that up to discuss how important it actually was for people of all generations, and that space would be, there was the same requirement for that free, open, wild space to allow people, whether they're 2 or 102, to be creative, be friendly with each other, and to get a multi-generational engagement going on between neighbours and communities, so that children are free to play, but that grown-ups are free to also play in that space in whatever way that everybody wants to. And then we moved on to looking at what those spaces could possibly be. So we were chatting about alleyways and the greening and making more safe and secure the alleyway spaces in whatever way that could be done. And then we also talked about how other people could be using that space, maybe for music. And I think that was it. If anybody else from the group can remember where we got to, jump on in, but I think that's all I can remember at the moment.
Lovely, thank you so much. Any other groups?
We talked just in our group that Kerry was in there, we talked about actually the use of space to help people with, particularly in current time, around people with mental health issues, and the fact that the creative use of spaces and the free use of spaces that feel safe and where they can connect with other people that they mightn't otherwise connect with can really be helpful in terms of the mental challenges that are out there. And we talked about how COVID has changed a lot of things. And particularly we talked about, Neil talked about unstructured play. So it isn't necessarily about having a play park or physical play area. It is about unstructured play where kids can be, and older people can be creative, use their imagination. There's no technology involved. And we talked about what does culture mean? And I thought this was really interesting, where someone said culture is what we do to connect, and play and playfulness can help us to connect.
Yeah, anyone would like to build on that from another group?
We were group 3, I think, and again, lots of similar stuff and a few bullet points just around the role of play, about keeping each other's spirits up and community cohesion, mental health and well-being, expressing our individual passions in a public way. And that kind of folded into a conversation we had around breaking down the barriers, where you don't have to be a full-time artist to be creative, and that people are through play they can find the confidence to take part and confidence to make without pressures of feeling judged for what you're creating, which I thought was quite interesting. We also talked about the breakdown of class and creativity, and what the relationship is between class and creativity, and how it's an accessible way to test and experiment and try things out if you're doing it in a playful way, and that'll engage people around you, but also test things out that you can maybe grow and build upon, and convince councils and stuff to get board. We did talk a little bit about barriers with regards to getting licensing and permissions to do things, and how we need to work with central and local governments to try and break down those barriers so people can feel confident to do playful things in their communities. And it's a great way of getting to know each other in your community. As we've seen throughout lockdown, there's been a lot of breaking down of barriers between people and neighbourhoods. So yeah, lots of similar stuff.
Yep, same here in Group 5. We had a similar conversation with regard to the need to hand leadership to the community more and enable kind of takeovers of spaces, and the need to kind of connect and share, particularly in the COVID times, and seeking out places, church halls, village greens, and reactivating those, because local communities and neighbourhoods are really wanting and needing to meet. We also discussed the idea about do you have to have a reason to play? There's all these benefits, but sometimes it's like the articulation of family friendly, the articulation of kind of the cultural industries and culture the articulation of those words can sometimes be a barrier in themselves. And by saying things like play and enjoy and get together, it's so much more user friendly in so many ways, and encourage people to feel that it's absolutely for them and that there's something to share.
That's good to know. So any final points before we move on from any of the other groups? We've heard from 4, 3 and 5. Anyone have an additional point that they'd love to share from Group 2 or 1?
One I didn't really. Sorry, have I interrupted somebody?
No, I will wait.
Okay. Had a group. Yeah, Marianne was part of my group. We had a really great group, and we talked around that the city Belfast has a lot of challenges that we feel that it doesn't have the playful spaces that it really should have. That it lacks green space. We want to have spaces that seem to be organic spaces where you can play, rather than designated areas where it's like that's the area you go play there and don't play anywhere else. And Fiona cited the fountains is one of the only areas which was a lovely feature, and it's just been used by children and they play on it organically. It was something that doesn't seem like it was really planned, but it's there and people use it and use it in a lovely way. Had a lot of lovely insight from Julie, who has had experience of working in the Nordic countries, and how places like Copenhagen and Stockholm have really gone to town in terms of ensuring there's cycle lanes everywhere in the city, and they've had a lot of chance to really look at space and looking at having green spaces around the residential areas in the city. And we had input from John from Dumworld in terms of how they've introduced like installations in the Titanic area, which has created play in that area. But we really felt that there's so many areas that could be used, but people don't go there, people aren't there. Louise from Dance talked about bringing, allowing space for the skateboarders in the city, spaces for older people, where in Europe, you've like France, Germany, you've got older people using green space for playing bowls, just seems like organically as well. So some really lovely insights, and if any of the group want to pitch in there, Marianne, you have something to say?
I wasn't going to pitch in, Wendy, on so much on what we've been saying, but on playfulness itself. And I'm saying that as someone with a huge amount of playfulness in my life, in my working life, because Cahoots and I comes from very playful angles. So play is really important there, and my family are hugely and publicly playful. They're Omadon Ensemble,
which is clown-based work. And my own textile practice is Playful. But playfulness is something that it strikes me is beaten out of us as we grow up and grow older. And it's associated just with childhood, and it isn't. It's in us all of our lives. All of our lives. I have, and don't laugh, I have, or I had until COVID really interfered, regular play dates for grown-ups in my house, which is my textile artist friends come, and we have an entire day devoted to playing with textiles and sewing and embroidery and a lot of really silly laughter and cake and stuff. And it's just about play. The barriers to playfulness are things like dignity and embarrassment and afraid of making a fool of ourselves. And we really need to be able to lose all of those concepts and be the child that still is within to play. So maybe we need to do something to promote that playfulness and to allow people to access their playfulness and set aside their self-consciousness at being someone who isn't 10, but wants to find the 10-year-old within and be the 10-year-old within, and then find ways of bringing activities into the city centre that allow that kind of thing. But I think we might need to have to do a little bit of work on promoting playfulness itself beforehand. If that's completely irrelevant, just do tell me to shut up.
Could I jump in very quickly with a quote, Marianne? Sorry, it's Neasa here, because I think that George Bernard Shaw would have agreed with you, and I think what you're saying is what he had said something many years ago, which is, we don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, and actually that quote I remember made its way into group 2. I think we'll move on now, though. Thank you, Marianne, by the way, for bringing us back to the idea of the notion of playfulness and what it means and the value of it, and that the fact we might need to promote that value first and foremost. I think that's a really important thing. But if everyone's happy, we'll move on. We've got 2 other interesting provocations. And we're going to do them together, just one after the other. The first is from Ben Payne. Ben currently runs a consultancy called B&G Partners. He has a background being creative educator, producer, and a leader who's known for many things, but in particular, he is also known for co-founding the Ministry of Stories, which I'm sure he can tell you a little bit more about. And then after Ben, we're going to have Neasa, who you've just heard from, Neasa, who's a creative director of a Playful City. And Playful City creates more playful spaces in cities, towns, and villages. So Ben, it'd be really interesting to hear your perspective.
Thank you, Kevin. So my name is Neasa, and I'm coming from Dublin, live in from Dublin. And I have to say, it's one of the nicest things about COVID actually is, although it's a pity we can't be face to face, at least we can be all together online. So it's lovely to meet you all virtually. So I'm just going to run through what the kind of things a Playful City does. I'll try not to dwell too long on each slide, because I know that we're kind of, we've got to hear Ben too, and we all want to chat after. So just as a quick overview, Playful City is a not-for-profit based in Dublin, but works in villages, towns and cities around Ireland on trying to create more playful spaces. And the key part of that is that we try to do that with and for communities. So why do we need a playful city? Well, for me as a parent, I often experience the city like this, literally constantly on edge, particularly when you have children in your holding a child's hand. And I guess this is one of the, I suppose, quotes that informs what we do. And what we're saying here, another way of kind of phrasing this quote is that cities should be designed with everybody in mind. Okay, not just the people that are going into work, not just the people who are going in to buy products. Cities should be designed in a way for people to actually enjoy and feel like the city is theirs as well. Unfortunately, as we looked at Dublin City, and particularly when I became a parent, I realised Dublin didn't really want me in the same way. And as I looked around, I realised, where have they put all the old people as well? So there's no families, there's no children, and there doesn't seem to be too many old people around here too. And unfortunately, what seems to be happening, although it's commendable that there is an increase in playgrounds, we do need them, but unfortunately they tend to be in suburbia at the corners of parks behind fences. And we're putting children by default into those spaces, and with them their carers and their families as well. So we had these kind of thoughts, and when I say we, it's myself and 3 other directors, Erin, Naomi and Marissa. And we were kind of, what is a playful city then? What can it look like? So I'm going to share some slides with you guys as to what we believe playful city can look like. And they're all to be taken not kind of as a singular idea, but kind of collectively. And indeed, there are a lot more than this, I have to say, in the years that we've been working on it. It's bigger than this too. But just to give you a flavour. So this is the idea of kind of simple designs, okay? It doesn't have to be too complicated. The idea of using prescriptive kind of materials, ensure creative places that inspire play for all ages. The idea of using bold materials that are for older children too. And this is something that has crept into the breakout room and indeed in the conversation since, that the idea of using underutilized spaces in cities. So these kind of unloved alleyways that all cities have that can actually be turned into places that are inviting for people of all ages. Using color in imaginative ways. Taking kind of, traditional kind of things like slides and climbing frames and using them like this in bold and dramatic ways. This is the sort of, the idea of, again, is moving away from traditional play areas to intergenerational places. So you have an older child skateboarding, a younger child climbing, and indeed an older person can sit down here as well. The idea of using kind of cheap materials and prototyping is something that's very close to our hearts. Again, using kind of materials, unexpected materials like this, reusing and repurposing them for creative and social spaces in cities. Encouraging risk and the benefit of risk, particularly for older children. Using and looking at linear spaces. So we talked about laneways and alleyways, but also just other types of spaces in cities and looking at them creatively and using them intelligently like this. The idea of inviting people into spaces in cities to come and just sit a while and enjoy the space and enjoy their city. The idea of bringing city right back into the cityscape. So again, moving away from the idea that play is for children and can only happen in the corner of a park. And in fact, it can be an intergenerational space right in the center of the city. This is Copenhagen, of course. Now, for some reason, it's not letting me move on to the next slide. Let's see. Okay, now it's going too fast. So there were some of the ideas that we had and what we looked at from around the world. And I guess our challenge was, how are we going to achieve something like this? So the first place was to bring some experts in, because we recognize that this is a very complex problem. So these are some of the partners, not all of them, that we've worked in over the years. They come from the children's rights perspective, but also designers, architects, county councils, funders, embassies, all sorts of different types. And we realized as well that, we need to consult with these people and we need to look at a problem from all different types of perspectives. But, I think as Stella has said and other people have mentioned as well, the real experts are actually the communities where you want to make an impact, where you want to put in perhaps an installation. If it's us, it could be a temporary installation, or it could be just an event. So we realized that we needed some sort of a tool to get people to come and talk to us. So with the help of an architect's firm, we designed this guy, the Spielmobile. And this is effectively a mobile device that we can bring into communities that encourage them to come over and talk to us and tell them what they'd like, what they think of maybe the event we're putting on, what they would like to see in their community, what kind of installation or how they would like to see a space used. There she is now in all her glory in Dublin city centre. And this is us using it in the city itself. And again, it's sort of coming back to this idea of it's so important to hear the views of the people who live in these communities of all ages, not just adults, children, teenagers. So we also, outside of, on-street consultation, we run workshops and conferences as well to get insights from people. So some of the things that we've done since setting up, I'm just going to give you a small flavour of some of the things that we've done, is this idea of a playful street, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. It's the playful streets, or play streets, are run all over the world. In the UK, it began in America many, many years ago. They're rife in Australia as well. And the idea is allowing communities to close down their street to encourage children out to play. And from our perspective, it's also about getting older people to teach the children the games that they used to play. So then it's intergenerational as well. And it gets older people out to play, and it gets community out, out connecting and talking to each other. So this is a toolkit that we put together, and we launched Playful Streets nationally a couple of years ago. And while the toolkit was informed by Playful Streets we ran ourselves, now really what we do is we run workshops with councils to train up kind of community volunteers and youth workers to start Playful Streets themselves in their own communities. Other things we've done is like the importance of using spaces around the city. So here we have walls being used to actually advocate for the importance of play in a playful way by collaborating with artists and poets. And this was a collaboration actually with the Ombudsman for Children to highlight the child's right to play under the United Nations Convention, which was the 25-year anniversary a couple of years ago. These are some photos from an event from a project we ran in Berlin, which led to us developing a curriculum to teach children about tactical urbanism. So we run this on with a charity here in Dublin, Bernardo's, where we get children to actually look at public space in their communities and ways that they can transform that by peer consulting and consulting with the community, and then coming up with ideas to temporarily take ownership of public space. And that's one of our big, I suppose, mantras, is that public space is public, it's ours. So let's start using it. This is our zigzag seating area, which was a temporary installation. Again, this was informed by conversations with young people and teenagers, children and older people from this area as well. This went in beside a canal where young people from the area swim an awful lot, but they've nowhere to hang out afterwards. So this was theirs for the summer. And younger children want somewhere that they can kind of climb and slide. So we tried to give a nod to that. And older people just want to have a little sit down and liked a bit of greenery. So we tried to throw a bit of that in there too. This is a linear space. This is a space down at the Quays in Hanover Quay in Dublin, where we put in xylophone seats. So again, very playful. And this is, in fact, this is a parallel to where the zigzag seating area went in. So again, when we're thinking about playful cities and what a playful city is, for us, it's about looking at these types of spaces in cities. So here it's a canal, which we believe should be used far more by people in Dublin. The water is actually clean. Young people from this area in the inner city use these canals all the time throughout the summer. So we have designed events down there with the young people as to what they would like and what they'd like to see. And then we create these big bills sponsored by corporate funders in the locality. But while at the same time running safety workshops for these young people who are in and out of the canal throughout the summer. And we're also working actually at the moment with UCD on trying to get some water quality testing put into, so because young people actually really care about that. They want to know what quality the water is that they're swimming in. So, so the next, I suppose I'm just going to cut it off there until we've done an awful lot more than this, but an awful lot of our events have obviously been cancelled because of COVID. So a big part of our work is advocacy. And currently what we're really advocating for in the time of COVID is the right of not just children, but all people to actively move throughout their city. And we see that obviously in Nordic countries, and someone mentioned it already, where they have an awful lot of cycle lanes, etc. School children are being forced off roads because our cities are designed for adults in cars. And there was a recent study, and I'm nearly finished now, by UNICEF, which found that children in the Netherlands are the happiest in the world. And the reason for that directly correlated to the independence they're given to actively move around their city, to walk to school, to cycle to school independently. So we believe that by creating more space for children to move, and adults, everyone, to move through their city actively, will create a more playful and inclusive city for everybody. And one of the ways to do that we found was, well, we gathered together this network over the summer, because everything we do has to be collaborative. And together with this network, we penned a letter to the National Transport Authority asking them to support this idea of a school street solution, which is really, I suppose, a first cousin, if you like, of a playful street. The idea of a school street is that you close the street a school is located on to cars in order to allow children to actively get to school, to go on their scooters, to go on their bikes, and to walk into school. And it moves away then from the congestion that can happen around schools, which has been found. The Road Safety Authority down here, it's incredibly dangerous for children. And it's also, there's atmospheric pollution is rife around schools as well. So we're almost using COVID as, if you like, as a means to get more active travel around the city as well. So that's really all I have to say about that for now. I was quick because there's an awful lot to say. But this, Jane Jacobs is obviously one of our big influencers. And I think this, this quote says it all, really. So cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created by everybody. So thanks for listening.
Thanks very much. Yeah, absolutely. Round of applause. Ben. Good man.
Okay. Sorry about that technical hitch. Thank you, Neasa. I'm going to talk about some very similar things, I think, in my presentation. As Kevin said, I work for an organisation that I set up called B&G Partners. We're a consultancy, and we've been doing work, for instance, with like Oxford City Council and Cherwell Council in Oxfordshire, which is partly around taking all the great resources that are in the city of Oxford and making them more accessible to young people across the county. We've just done a project with Historic England on their digital education programme. But Gerald Richards, who's my partner, we met through running the two organisations that I'm going to talk about a bit in this presentation, which was the Ministry of Stories in the UK and in London, and 826 National, which is in the United States. And I'm going to try and give you some background to those organisations, and I think why they're relevant to the context of Playful City. I'm going to describe a key project from Ministry of Stories, which I think encapsulates this, and give you some reflections on what we learned from doing this in other projects with Ministry of Stories over 10 years. So it's a bit of a history, really, because I've not been with the organisation now for about 18 months. So Ministry of Stories is a writing centre for children aged around 8 to 14. I co-founded it in Hoxton in East London in 2010. It does all kinds of writing projects, but there was a principle in that the young people took the imaginative lead in those projects. and that they generally responded to and worked with local environment and community as their inspiration. Now, the person whose sort of brainchild this was a guy called Dave Eggers, who's a writer based in San Francisco. And he started with a kind of notion, which was that teachers were telling him that lots of children and young people in San Francisco, if they had issues with writing and literacy, or if they just wanted to do more writing, that the teachers didn't have enough one-to-one time with those kids. So his idea was that there would be enough people within San Francisco who would be willing to volunteer their time to be writing mentors to local children. So that's where he started. And it's an idea that's now gone all over the world. There's an organization in Dublin called Fighting Words, which is inspired by the same model. And there's a project in Belfast, which is also called Fighting Words. And his sort of first starting point was to find a space. So this is why in America, all of the writing centers are called 826s, because the first one was founded at 826 Valencia Street, which is in the Mission District. And he found a space which I think was a local gym. And the guy who was the landlord said, it's great that you want to do this here, but you've got a bit of a problem, which is that the space is actually zoned for retail. It has to operate as a shop. So this was a kind of creative challenge to him. He brought in a group of designers, and they took a look at the inside, and he says, well, it feels like you're in the inside of a ship. It's all wood paneled. So what we'll do is we'll pretend to open this as a shop for pirates, and you can go to the shop and you can buy anything that pirates might want to buy, like birdseed for your parrot, replacement wooden legs, eye patches, and we'll put the shop and design the shop on the front, and only the children will know that there's a writing centre behind it. So this idea kind of took off, this idea of a kind of imaginative shop for an imaginary customer, and it went all around America. So if you go to New York, there's a superhero supply store because it's Gotham City, obviously. And inside those shops, you can find all kinds of things that you need to be a superhero. So you can be fitted with your cape, and you can test it out on a wind machine. You can also buy things that help you climb the wall. And some parents are a bit dismayed to find out that they actually work, and children can climb the wall using the things that stick you to the wall. And so it became a way of raising money for the organization, because these are real shops making real things that people buy. But it's also about a kind of imaginative re-gearing of children and adults when they come in. It's saying that stories are all around us, that stories can have a kind of concrete reality in the world. So me and Lucy, who was the other co-founder, were really inspired by this, and we decided we wanted to do something like this in London together. And one of the things that we were really interested in was the idea of, what kind of shop would be. So we consulted with local children. And the thing that really excited them was the idea of a shop for monsters. So the Ministry of Stories exists behind a shop called Hoxton Street Monster Supplies. It's a shop for monsters, not a shop about monsters. So there's a really kind of clear narrative about what guides, what happens in the shop, and all the products. And another kind of principle that was really important to us was the idea of the children leading creative process. And this is a project called Haircuts by Children. I don't know if anyone has heard this. And the story behind that was, in the run-up to us opening Ministry of Stories, Lucy went along and took part in this project. And it is literally, you go along and you have your hair cut and redone by children. And I was a bit naive about it. I thought, oh, that's wonderful. They train these children wonderfully to be brilliant hairdressers and to do your hair brilliantly. And she said, well, no, not actually. They just do exactly what they want. And I said, well, what did they do to you? And she said, well, they turned my hair blue. They dyed it all completely blue. And I said, but your hair's red. And she said, yes, that's part of the point. The point is you cede control to children and that you allow them to kind of take charge of what is actually going on. And there's a kind of thinking behind this that the guy who conceived this project says that society is what he calls adult-titarian, so that children are very much marginalized in the way that we think about our spaces and think about what we do. So we disempower them. So this project was really about what happens if you put children in the driving seat and you put them in power. So this was one of the things that we wanted to explore in lots of the projects that we did together. We also talked to them about what would happen, what kind of products we would have in the shop. So they came up with lots of the ideas for the eShop products. So this is breath fresheners for zombies. So they were always things that zombies would, you know, monsters would actually need in their everyday lives. This was a complete range of tinned fear. So the idea was that we thought monsters might have bad days like everybody else and wake up and not feel particularly scary. So along the lines of kind of canned laughter, they could kind of come in and buy a tin of this to kind of make them scary. And we gave them a range of grades. So the mildest dose was a vague sense of unease, and the really kind of full-on hardcore tin was mortal terror. And inside we put a story commissioned from a well-known writer that was written based on the title of the tin. So there were some sweets inside and a written story. And this was one of our best-selling products, obviously come up with by children. This was a real winner for us. The idea behind this was that, you know, monsters can't just go out and eat people off the street anymore. They need to do it in a more discreet way. So we said that we had organic farms kind of farming human bodily fluids and then put them into jars. This is actually organic lemon curd, so you can eat it, but I think you can agree it does look quite a lot like snot. So a lot of what we were doing, obviously, was kind of creating this space for the imagination. The idea was that the shop existed on the street. It is between a nail bar and the dry cleaners. So the idea is that it occupies a space and just genuinely says, why wouldn't there be a shop for monsters on the street? And then through a secret door in the shelves behind the shop, the writing went on. And children in these cases always wrote about what they wanted to write about. So this is a project where they would turn up with nothing but their inspirations and their imaginations, and then we would work with a group of volunteers, mentors, to kind of publish their books at the end of 2 hours. And they wrote about what they wanted to write about. So sometimes they would use the shop as inspiration, but in this case, this was a rom-com between chicken and chips called Loving KFC. So the idea was that all the subject matter and the content of what they were doing was coming from their own imaginations. And we gave them the permission to say, you can write about what you want to write. So this was one of our biggest projects. So once we started all of this different work, we began to sort of think about, well, what's the greatest extent that we can take this idea? So we tasked a group of local children in the neighborhood with the idea that they were going to declare independence from the adult world. So they would do all of this through writing. So this was a project that we did through about 3 or 4 months of the summer, where they came up with their own country, which was called the Children's Republic of Shoreditch. And this is in fact their embassy. So they co-designed this embassy with a local design company, which was in another shop. And they designed and ran lots of the activities inside. So there was a border crossing where it would buzz red if you didn't have positive thoughts. You were only allowed into the Children's Republic if you had positive, happy thoughts. And there were lots of kinds of different activities, like a kind of postal service. There was a civil service who wrote all the manifestos and the laws. There was a secret service who went out disguised as a school party, kind of surveying the area. And the idea was that the children were kind of leading all of this, leading this work, and the adults helped and facilitated that, and were also effectively part of the audience for it. They also wrote letters to local dignitaries, so they wrote declaring independence to the Queen, the Prime Minister, and the Mayor of London, and we made sure that they all got replies, which was very important. And they also composed their own national anthem. And there was also part of the project was designing the passport, which encapsulated lots of the kind of values of the Children's Republic. So I'm not sure if you can see that here, but you can see their manifesto. We believe in fairness, we believe in trust, we believe in fun, we believe in love, in education, in savings, that no one should be bullied. We believe in no more violence, and we believe in clouds. So there's this kind of common idea is if you put children in charge, it's going to turn out like Lord of the Flies, but actually they have a really wonderful kind of creative, rational way of interpreting these tasks. So they are, if you treat them like adults, they will come up with these extraordinary kind of creative responses. And this all has a point. So this is a child called Amuchan, who was one of the children who engaged with Children's Republic and actually was with us for a couple of years. And when he first came to Ministry of Stories, I think he was probably a bit of a reluctant writer, really. His mum was Turkish, so English was not her first language. She didn't feel very confident about helping him with his homework at home. So she brought him along to the club, and he was really initially quite unsure about it. But because he could become as kind of a secret agent in the Children's Republic, a sort of light switched on at that point. And he ended up going to number 10 Downing Street, and they're collaboratively running a writing workshop with a group of people in Downing Street. And he called himself the Minister of Smartness. So, I mean, not only is it about having fun, it's also about, you know, improving and developing your kind of educational confidence. And his mum sort of said to us, you know, you basically made the difference in getting my child to kind of engage with literacy. And the important thing is that literacy is often seen as a bit of a deficit thing. But if you can put children in a situation where they feel confident and they feel like experts in a sort of subject, lots of the things that we really think are important come as a kind of byproduct almost of that. So it's important not just in terms of having fun, but it's also in terms of, you know, giving the confidence to believe that their story and their voice really matters. It was a very much kind of community effort. So we wanted to engage lots of different people as mentors and volunteers. And we had to be very open and creative about how that happened. We had lots of people who wanted to be volunteers and who were very confident about coming through the door, but other people, you know, we needed to do more work and more outreach to kind of make that happen. So, but and we were told when we first arrived that it might take up to 10 years for the community to kind of have ownership over what we were doing. And I think that's because in that part of London, people were very used to the idea of kind of creative projects sort of popping up and disappearing and not being around for very long. And also that sometimes they were going to be charged for the work, and everything that we did in terms of its kind of community work and the work with parents was all free of charge. And as I say, you know, we tried to work with like local businesses, not just like design businesses or creative businesses. One of the real interests of the children was often about food. So we did lots of projects about food involving different businesses along the street. And this is Linda, who was owned a bakery which had been in the street for 150 years, and she was actually selling up. And it's important to note that I think that we were very much part of an aspect of shift towards gentrification of this part of London, and that this is a real issue for some people. But she came to our sort of 7th or 8th birthday and wanted to kind of say, I am moving away, I am soling up my business. But actually, I think, you know, the work of organisations like this to help local children is really fundamentally important. And it felt like we'd beaten the deadline by a couple of years anyway. So just to sort of finish up, summary, I think, you know, children leading things brings benefits, but, you know, it is about kind of ceding control and not necessarily feeling like you need to dictate or define everything. Projects like the Children's Republic were really valuable and inspiring, but they were very complicated and complex, and we found we needed to get better at doing things in perhaps a more of a lo-fi way. We needed to really think about what the role and responsibility of adults was in this sort of space and how they engage with it. And we ended up with this idea that the children created the content and the adults kind of facilitated and created the frame. We said that play, as we said in other discussions, it's good in itself and it's good for learning, and it really helped with kind of community engagement and community development, but it took a long time to create that sort of sense of ownership. And it definitely inspires new ideas and possibilities. So the Children's Republic, for instance, has been used by other organisations to engage children and young people in kind of civic design and thinking about their community and about what they want out of it. So it's providing models for that kind of discussion.
Yay! Absolutely. Fantastic, both Neasa and Ben. Thank you so much for those insights. Particularly loved the notion of that idea of being bold and imaginative, both with materials, but also in the way that you might present play, and then the value of play and what it might bring and what changes it might affect in people's lives, and in particular, in your case, Ben, young people's lives. That's quite inspirational. So we're going to go back quickly into breakout rooms. We'd like to kind of end around 12 if we can. So the way we're going to do this time, there's a couple of questions. I'll put them in the chat. Yeah, similar thing. You'll be in a different group. You have a little bit of time. We'll give you a reminder. And this time when you're feeding back, your goal is to have a one-line insight from your conversation. So let's go straight to it, and we'll see you in a little while. Okay, brilliant. I know we're on slightly, but hopefully you found, those of you able to stay, that it was worth it. So we're going to do a quick round. You've got one line of those who wish to volunteer the one insight from their conversation. And we'll have time for a couple. So somebody just jump ahead in.
I can't remember what group I was in. Pierre led our group. I can't remember what number it was. Our one line would be design for the climate you actually live in.
Thank you. Any others? One more maybe?
Can I add one from us, even though I didn't ask any of you, but we did say it 3 times, which was make mistakes, screw up. Being a bit shit is fine, and it's on the way to making the right thing. And I would add to that the right thing is going to change. It might be right for now, for 3 years, but it's not necessarily going to be right in another 10 years. But making mistakes is the way forward.
Thank you, Stella. Oh, I think one more. 3 seems more egalitarian.
Creating space for play to happen, utilising nature, making the most of space that belongs to everyone, and taking risks is a way of discovering innovation.
Fantastic. If you have any final comments?
Can I say one?
Whoa. Yes, go ahead. Do it.
Very quickly. Play matters.
Excellent. Was there one more in there?
Our group were stop engineering, and I think let things happen organically, and that's it. Stop engineering.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Just because we've overrun a little bit, I'm conscious that it would be good to draw the session to a close. I have found it really fascinating. Thank you immensely to Neasa, Ben, and Stella for their inspiration, insight, and energy, and commitment to the things that they're doing. I found that really good. The one thing we could do to end, unless there's a final word from somebody who hasn't spoken who would like to speak.
One poignant thing that Esther said was, which I think is really important in all the work that we do going forward, is she talked about make sure that we leave plenty of time for meaningful engagement. I thought that was really relevant to anything that we're doing and anything we're thinking about developing in the city.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Really appreciate all of your time and energy. This has been great.
Yes.
Look out to see you at the next ones. But for now, we'll just say goodbye. If you feel like you can leave the meeting,
Thank you.
and enjoy the rest of your day. All the best.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.